G'day guys, it's Clarky here with a video that was very popular last off-season. It was my predicted lineups. So I did them around this time last year, around the December mark, and then updated them about a month out from the season. So these are my early predicted sides for 2020 in the NRL. Let's get it rolling without further ado. And if you want to see the images in full size, they'll be available over the next fortnight on my Facebook and Instagram. So for the Broncos here, looking at this team, obviously there's one blaring omission, and that is Darius Boyd. I just can't find a spot for him on this team, guys. When I look at his form in 2019, and I discard the player that we once knew was Darius Boyd, because he was a Clive Churchill's, he was the Australian Kangaroos and the Queensland Maroons fullback. But these are all was, and you look at the rest of this Broncos team, they're all young guns that are moving forward. They are now. They're not what was. And therefore, I just can't find spot for Darius Boyd there. So I've got Jermaine Asako at fullback. I thought he was great in open space at the Nines. Think he can do the same for the Broncos in the 13-man code. My wingers, I've gone with Corey Oates and Jordan Kahu, who returns to the club. I think that's a big in. And I do like Jordan Kahu coming back in there. A little bit of experience. Him and Oates, a formidable wing pairing there. Centers, I went with Jack Bird and Tony Staggs. For the halves, I went with Anthony Milford and Brodie Croft. Brodie Croft already brought into the leadership side there, so clearly they value him. And he is being brought in to direct this team around the park, so they wouldn't have signed him to play reserve grade, so he'll be there alongside, I believe, Anthony Milford. I don't think Anthony Milford is the best 5'8". I prefer him at fullback, but the fact is he is the most experienced half in that team, despite being better at another position. Say what you will, I think he needs to be there with Croft at least for the first couple years. I've gone with Payne Haas, Andrew McCulloch, and Matt Lodge there up at the front row. With Andrew McCulloch, I've got Jake Turpin on the bench there, and I think he'll really put some pressure on him. Potentially by the end of the year, he'll wear the number 9 permanently, and McCulloch could be transferred back to reserve grade or Super League. We'll see how that plays out. My back row is Alex Glenn, Dave Fafita, and Tavita Pengai Jr. Very, very formidable, powerful back row there. On the bench, as I talked about before, Jake Turpin, I've got him as my utility. I've got Joe Offahen-Gowie. I think he played awesome there for the Maroons, so he can definitely do the job in the NRL. Thomas Flegler and Patrick Carrigan. Now, you could potentially want to move Joe Offahen-Gowie to lock and have Tavita Pengai Jr. come off the bench. But I believe that could be a mistake, because then you have three relatively inexperienced forwards in Carrigan, Flegler, and TPJ off the bench. Whereas Offahen-Gowie there, you're injecting a little bit of experience with your youth at the same time. A bit of depth there for the Broncos also, guys. As far as outside backs go, they have Tessie Niu, the guy that played half-back for Tonga. He usually plays centre. He'll be one to keep your eye on. Herbie Farnworth and Xavier Coates. We saw a little bit of them in 2019. Same story for Parisi. He, there's so many great players here, but it's just so hard to fit them into this Broncos 17. Jesse Arthurs, we still don't know his ceiling, how good he could be. He looked pretty good for the Titans. And in the halves there, obviously Tom Dearden and Sean O'Sullivan will be ready by round 1, but you have to imagine they'll certainly be putting some pressure on Brodie Croft and Anthony Milford there potentially. But that's my predicted Broncos lineup. Let's move on to the Bulldogs. All right, for the Bulldogs, guys, I've got Dallin Monteni-Zelezniak at fullback. My wings, Remy Smith and Jaden Ockenbaugh. I got Will Hopewadi and Kerrod Holland there in the centres. I think Holland in particular just needs a second chance in the NRL. I think he can be a fantastic player, a game breaker centre, which is what the Bulldogs need. We've got Lachlan Lewis and Jack Cogger making up the halves. Obviously, with Kieran Foran out for the year, two relatively inexperienced halves, but they're going to have to make do with them. My front row is Adam Tolman, Jeremy Marshall King, and Dylan Napa. I think I said Aaron Tolman there. Obviously, I meant Aiden. My apologies. My back row is Corey Harawira-Naira, Joe Stimson, and Josh Jackson. I've moved Josh Jackson to lock now. I think at this stage of his career, he's a middle defender, a middle ball runner. He's no longer that threat on the edge that he might have once been. Whereas I think Joe Stimson and Corey Harawira-Naira can really be damaging out wide there on the edges, something that Josh Jackson is probably more suited to the middle at this stage in his career. My bench utility is Soni Katoa. I've gone with Dean Britt, Adam Elliott, and Raymond Fartala-Mariner to round out my bench for the Bulldogs. A couple players unlucky to miss out here, guys. Brandon Wakeham, potentially he'll be in there at 6 or 7 at some stage through the year. Christian Crichton, Morgan Harper, Marcelo Montoya, they could all definitely be in that back line somewhere also. And Nick Meaney. He's coming off a hat-trick in round 25 last year, so, I mean, he's only as good as your last game, and he is in form. But I just don't think wing's his best position. I think his best attribute is his speed, acceleration, and evasive skills, and he can't necessarily utilize them on the wing, whereas when he's at fullback, he has more open space to utilize those. So I've left him out of the side. And for the forward pack, you got Chris Smith, Renouf Tuamanga, and Suaso Su, who is almost finished his ACL rehabilitation. So they're all options for the Dogs there also. Let's move on to the Cowboys. I'm really excited for the Cowboys this year, guys. I think they will have a fairly decent year and give the top 8 a really good crack. So here's my Cowboys side. I've gone with Valentine Holmes at fullback. Obviously, you can't sign him for $1 million and put him on the wing, even though people will say that's his better position. There's never been a winger on $1 million in the NRL because you just can't justify that price tag there. My wings, I've gone with Kyle Feldt and Murray Tuilagi. I think he's one for the future, and Kyle Feldt, obviously, we know he's a star. My centres are Justin O'Neill and Isan Masters. O'Neill really impressed me before he got injured. Very seriously injured. It was in hospital for a while, actually. But I think he'll come back straight into form, hopefully. Scott Drinkwater, I've moved him from fullback into the halves alongside the formidable Michael Morgan, who I think will have a great year. My front row here is Jordan McLean, Jake Granville, Josh Maguire, and you'll see there I've got Reece Robson at 14, and I think by the end of this year he could really put some pressure and potentially wear the number 9 instead of Granville permanently. My back row is Gavin Cooper, Shane Wright, and Jason Tamalolo. Very, very strong back row. And making up my bench forwards are Cohen Hess, Francis Molo, and John Asiata. So that is a super, super strong team there. If the Cowboys can get it all together and put the pieces in the right place, and they can have a very, very good year and definitely make a run for the 8. A couple players unlucky to miss out. I think we'll see Dan Russell, the PNG centre, make his debut some stage this year. Jake Clifford, very unlucky to miss out. He could potentially be there at 6, and Drinkwater could be forced to reserve grade, or maybe that wing spot there. We don't know yet. Tom Opacek, probably unlucky to miss out. I thought he was pretty strong when he played there last year, did his job. And Corey Jensen, hasn't played NRL for a while now, guys, but he was very strong for the Townsville Blackhawks last year in Queensland Cup, so potentially he could make his way into that side at some stage. Let's move on to the Dragons, guys. We got Zachy Lomax at fullback. Well, McGregor, the coach, has actually already come out and said he will be the fullback. He'll get first crack, so it didn't really make sense for me to put anyone else there. Jason Saab and Jordan Pereira are my choices for wing there. Saab is going to be a star. I really, really like this kid. And Pereira, I'm a massive fan of his also. I think he's a great player. My centres are Ewan Aitken and Tim Laffey. Now, I think we need to give them a second chance, and Dragons fans in particular are really, really pissed off at them, and they just don't want them anymore. But, you have to think back only a year ago or 2 years ago, Ewan Aitken in 2018 was the man for the Blues centre spot. It was only Latrell Mitchell that outplayed him at the last moment. So Aitken, we know he can be a fantastic player, and the same goes for Tim Laffey. So I've given them both a chance here round 1 next year to come back into some form. My halves are Corey Norman, Ben Hunt, no surprises there. My front row is James Graham, Cameron McInnes, and Paul Vaughan. Very strong front row there. My back row is Tarek Sims, Tyson Frizzell, and Blake Laurie. Again, no real surprises there. My bench is Isaac Luke. Now, I'm not sure how they utilise him, but I assume they didn't sign him to play reserve grade. Josh Kerr, Jacob Host, and Corbin Sims. So pretty strong bench there. A bit of youth there in Kerr and Host. I think they're both fantastic players and players for the future. Players unlucky to miss out here. You got Jonas Pearson, Michaeli Ravawala, and Tristan Saylor. I think they'll all be fantastic players, particularly Tristan Saylor. The only issue I have for him right now is he sort of needs to come into that 14 jersey until he discovers what his position is, because he can play wing, centre, 5'8", a bit of halfback, and fullback. So he can cover the whole back line, which we've seen with players like Connor Watson isn't necessarily always a good thing as far as career progression and locking down a regular first grade spot is concerned. And there's someone else that I'm forgetting here that was unlucky to miss out, and their name is just not coming to me. So I do apologise there. Joe Loverdale, probably another one that we might see at some stage. He's a hooker for Fiji. He's pretty strong there. And this is really irking me here, guys. There was someone else that I actually replaced Corbin Sims with. Jackson Ford. There it is, Jackson Ford. I think he was fantastic last year, and he'll be there at some stage this year also. But let's move on to the Parramatta Eels. Now, my starting Eels backline is really no surprises here from 1 to 7, so I'll just read down as is. Gutherson, Sevo, Jennings, Blake, Ferguson, Brown, Moses. My front row, I've gone with the pairing of Junior Paulo and Regan Campbell-Gillard with Reed Marnie there at hooker. Very strong front row. Back row, possibly the strongest forward pack in the competition, really. Ryan Madison, Sean Lane, and Nathan Brown. I put Brad Takarangi at 14 because he can play back row, lock, 5/8, wing, bit of hooker if you need, and centre. He's just extremely versatile, and I really think he is a utility player. Brad Takarangi, for me, and this is not so much last season, this is more in seasons before, I noticed he would sort of drift in and out of games. When he was hot and had the hot hand, he was so devastating. But at other times, if the ball wasn't coming to him, he'd sort of fade slowly out of the game and not look disinterested, but not look as interested as he does in other games. So having him in the 14 role where he comes on with a purpose, I really like that. Marata Niokore, unfortunately, he has to move back to the bench, I believe. Daniel Alvaro, think he needs a second chance. Eels Player of the Year in 2018. Really hard worker, can be a good player. Didn't have the best last year, but let's give him another chance, I believe. And Kane Evans, he was really strong towards the end of last year. And for Fiji, players unlucky to miss out, guys. Well, they have a lot of depth here. They've got George Jennings, Jamin Salmon, Will Smith. In particular, I love this kid, Ethan Parry. I think he's certainly one for the future, but I just can't put him anywhere in that back line at the moment. And I mean, rightfully so. I mean, how are you going to drop Ferguson, Sevo, Wonga Blake, Jennings, or Gutherson? You just can't, unfortunately. And for the forward pack, they've got Dave Gower, Ray Stone, Penny Taripo, and Oregon Kafusi there. All great players. They obviously do have Stefano Ucamano. I can't say that last name, but he's really wanted by the Tigers at the moment. I'm not sure if he'll be in the Eels colours for 2020, so I haven't put him in there. But, you know, even players like Oregon Kafusi, they seem like they're getting restless in reserve grade. The Eels currently have a very strong forward pack. I don't see them breaking in, so the Eels are at risk of losing some of their young guns. For the Knights, guys, not too many surprises here, but maybe a couple that you might be surprised by. Kalen Ponga is my fullback. Edric Lee and Stafford Toa on the wings. Toa young. I think he comes right in and replaces Sean Kenny-Dow. My centres are Bradman Best and Jaimel Hunt. Bradman Best just simply needs to be there around one. They need to keep developing this kid. He is going to be, in my opinion, the Bronson Xerri story of 2020. 2019, there was this young kid, 18 years old, Bronson Xerri. He debuts. He looks good. By the end of the year, everyone knows who he is. He's being talked about for the Blues. He's a star. That will be Bradman Best in 2020. Mark my words. Now, Mitchell Pearce needs a solid 5/8 partner. He hasn't had one for the last year, and it really plagued the Knights, and I think Connor Watson is the man to do that. I think they should persist with him and consistently play him at 5/8 and make him a role player. Do not make him play both sides of the field. Leave him to his left or right corridor to control. Have Kalen Ponga on the back of his back lines, and I think with a short kicking game and his dangerous running game, he can be a fantastic player there. David Clemmer, Jaden Brayley, new signing, and Daniel Saifiti make up my front row. My back row is Lotson Fitzgibbon, Sione Matautia, and Mitchell Barnett, the player of the year. Phenomenal team there, but we've still got the bench to go. We've got Danny Levi in 14. They do have a couple options there for that utility role, but I've gone with Danny there. Herman Sasa, Aiden Guerra, I think we're forgetting how good he can be, and Tim Glasby as well. Maroon's lock/prop on the bench there. Knights have a lot of depth. They have the most depth, in my opinion, of any team still. So their depth includes Tautau Moga, he could potentially be there on the wing for Stafford Toa. Mason Lino, he could potentially be the 5/8 partner. Phoenix Crossland, Kurt Mann, two more people that could be the 5/8 partner or utility. Tex Hoy, Anari Chuala, Brody Jones, Jacob Saifiti, Josh King, Bo Firma, who will return from an ACL injury, Pasami Solo, and Matt Croker. A really good lock forward for their New South Wales Blues side, and also an under-20s player for the Blues. So they've got a lot of depth there, a lot of young guns coming through. It'll be interesting how soon the new coach, Adam O'Brien, decides to use them. But regardless, I think this is a fantastic team for the Knights, and I do see them doing well in 2019. Panthers here, guys. So I've got Dylan Edwards, Brian To'o, and Josh Mansour as my back three. My centres are Dean Farray and Brent Naden. No surprises there. My halves, I've given Jerome Luai the nod ahead of Matt Burton, and I got him alongside, obviously, Nathan Cleary. My front row is Moses Leota, Appy Coruscant, and James Tarmo. My back row is Isaiah Yeo, Viliami Kikau, and James Fisher-Harris, Player of the Year. Very, very strong team there. My bench now, I wanted to fit Mitch Kenny into this side because I think he's a great hooker and one with a lot of potential. But unfortunately, I just couldn't find room for him, and I've had to go with Kurt Capewell as my utility. I've got Liam Martin on the bench, Spencer Linu, and Jack Hetherington, who didn't play much in 2019, but I loved his aggression when he was there in 2018. I think he's a great player, and the Panthers are rumoured to be signing Zane Tedavano at the time of me recording this video. If that happens, I probably have to put Zane Tedavano, well, okay, correction, I definitely have to put Zane Tedavano there, potentially start him actually over Moses Leota, which would force Leota to the bench for either Lienu or Jack Hetherington. So it'll be interesting to see whether they make that signing or not, but they do have a little bit of depth here. They have Caleb Aikens, who can play fullback wing centre, Jed Cartwright, Matt Burton, Malachi Watene-Zelezniak. They have Stephen Crichton, who looks like a great young talent, Cade Ellis, Mitch Kenny that we spoke about, and a player that I really think will be there at stages throughout 2019. I just don't think he'll be there in round one, and that's Billy Burns. I think he's a great talent. For the Rabbitohs, guys, my fullback is Alex Johnston. My wings are Campbell Graham and Dane Gagai. I have gone with Braden Burns, who was fantastic before he got injured. I've got him at centre alongside James Roberts, who I believe really needs to lift his game. I'm just going to start with it. It feels like the way I'm talking feels like I'm reading something, but this is all just straight off the top of my head. I'm not reading anything, and I just realized that there's I don't know what's going on. Anyway, James Graham. Oh, what's happened? Fell apart. James Roberts. I think he's a fantastic player, but I thought at stages throughout 2019 he looked disinterested. Didn't look like he wanted to be out there on the field. He didn't actively pursue the ball, and I really want to see him rebound this year in a positive way. I've got Cody Walker and Adam Reynolds making up my halves. My front row is Thomas Burgess, Damien Cook, and Liam Knight. I'm not sure if Liam Knight's ready to start for the full 25 rounds yet. He is still a little bit inexperienced and raw, but I do love his aggression, even when it does lead to penalties, unfortunately. Sometimes he's a great player. Back row, Jaden Sewer, Ethan Lowe, and Cameron Murray. Now, they are very short on back row stocks there. We have the bench, Adam Dowie, of course, as my utility. He can play anywhere. Mark Nichols, Junior Tola, and Tom Amone making up the bench there. Now, this is where I'm concerned for the Rabbitohs, guys. Their depth, as far as NRL experience goes for back rows, is Bailey Sironen. That's it. Just Bailey Sironen, which is obviously in some ways concerning. We have Corey Allen, we have Stephen Masters, Adeni Gebe, the PNG superstar from winner Manly Seagulls. We have Bryson Goodwin, a former premiership winner, or part of the premiership team, returning to the team, and Troy Dargan. The Troy Dargan signing is an interesting one for me because obviously they did lose Connor Tracy, so they lost a little bit of depth there, but Troy Dargan was with Wayne Bennett at the Broncos, and he's obviously brought him across for a reason, and because he sees something special in him. So he will be one to keep your eye on, particularly if Cody Walker or Adam Reynolds are selected for the Blues. For the Raiders here, guys, a couple really big changes here for this team. My backline is Chance Nickel-Klogstad. I've got Bailey Simonson taking the full wing spot now off Jordan Rapana, who's left for Japanese rugby. My centres are Jared Croker and Curtis Scott. I've left BJ Leilua out of this team because I just don't see where he fits into that backline. I know you can say, okay, well, let's play BJ Leilua at right centre and put Curtis Scott on a wing, but I don't think Curtis Scott's a winger. I think he is a true centre, a traditional centre, a great centre, and he's only 22. He's only going to continue to get better. Whereas BJ Leilua, for me, there's concerns about that neck injury and how he will return. Obviously, he returned last year and looked fantastic, but at 28 years of age with a serious injury, I believe Curtis Scott has more upside to his game. I've got Nick Kotrick on the wing outside him. My halves are Jack Wyden and George Williams on the back of Aiden Caesar leaving the club. My front row pairing is Josh Papali, Josh Hodgson, and Corey Horsburgh. I'm going to start him because he's young, raw, aggressive, and he adds another layer or another element to their forward pack. My back row is Elliot Whitehead, John Bateman, and Joseph Tapane, who was a fantastic underrated footballer. I've got Saliva Havili coming off the bench, Emre Gula, Sia Soliola, and Ryan Sutton make up my bench there. I'd really like to see Ryan Sutton back in first grade. To be honest with you guys, I was a little bit sad last year when he got dropped in the finals there. I thought he should have been there. Anyway, these are the players that were unlucky to miss out, guys. We've got BJ Leilua, Sebastian Chris, Michael Oldfield, Sam Williams, who's re-signed a 2-year deal, Jack Murchie, Hudson Young, We've got Tom Starling and Luke Bateman, who hasn't seen first grade in a while, but he was a consistent first grader for the Raiders there for a few seasons. And on Hudson Young, guys, I think he comes back into the side at some stage this year, but I think Ricky Stewart's either going to do one of two things. I think he's going to rush him straight back in on the premises that he will use all this built-up anger and aggression and have a really breakout year, or he could relegate him to reserve grade and hope that everyone forgets about him and forgets about his 2 eye gouge suspensions. So it will be interesting how Ricky Stewart handles that when he's ready to return from suspension. Sydney Roosters here, guys. Not too many changes for this team, so I will just read top to bottom and go over the one change. James Tedesco, Daniel Tupou, Latrell Mitchell, Joseph Manu, Morris, Keary, Kyle Flanagan, Jared Warrior-Hargraves, Friend, TKO, Takiyaho, Cordner, Orbison, Radley, Verrills on the bench there. I'd like to see him start, but it looks like Jake Friend's going to remain a Rooster. So Crichton, Butcher, and Liu rounding out my bench. Now, obviously, the big change there is Kyle Flanagan. I've got him ahead of Lachlan Lamb and ahead of Drew Hutchinson. I think he's a fantastic player, and I don't think they would have signed him from the Sharks, and I don't think he would have negotiated a release from the Sharks to play reserve grade. So I'll have him starting there, and he will actually be my early prediction for buy of the year. A bit of depth here for the Roosters also. They have Billy Smith, Drew Hutchinson, Lachlan Lamb, Matt Ikavalu, Ryan Hall, Satili Tupanua, Collins, and Farmasili. So a lot of depth there. Still an absolutely fantastic team on paper despite losing Cooper Cronk. For the Manly Seagulls, guys, my back three are Tom Trbojevic, Ruben Garrick, George Tafua. My centres are Brad Parker and Moses Sully. No surprises there. I've gone with Dylan Walker at 5'8" alongside Daly Cherry Evans because I feel he really plays that role well. He has a nice running game and a nice kicking game, but he doesn't overplay his hand, and he still lets Daly Cherry Evans sort of run this team. So I got Dylan Walker there at 5'8". My front row, no surprise. Well, there is a little surprise here, actually. Adam Fanua-Blake, Cade Cust, and Martin Tapau. Now, I've gone with Cade Cust at hooker, obviously with Manassi Fayonu stood down indefinitely until his court case is resolved. The Seagulls have a big problem at hooker because they just released Appy Coruscant to the Penrith Panthers. So I think Cade Cust, I think he's up around the 100 kilograms mark. He has a great passing game when he's played 5'8", a nice short kicking game. He has the correct skills and attributes to be a successful hooker in the NRL, but it'll be interesting to see what Des Hasler does there to plug that gap. I've got Joel Thompson, Curtis Siren, and Jake Trbojevic as my back row there. No surprises at all. I've got Lachlan Croker there at 14 because he can also play hooker, and I think they're just going to have to make do with a hooker because I don't believe they have the funds to sign one, so I think that's the best scenario there for Manly fans. Sean Kepi, Corey Waddell, and Jack Gazowski round out my bench, guys, and if you stay with me, we've got about 5 more teams to go. For the Cronulla Sharks, guys, now a bit of a surprise here, but I've gone with Ronaldo Mulatalo. I think he's a fantastic player. I really, really like this guy. It's probably a little bit surprising that I have him on the wing there over Josh Dugan, so I'll get that out of the way now, but I'll get onto that a bit later. Matt Moylan, Bronson Xerri, Josh Morris, Jesse Ramian make up the rest of the back line there. Now, you're probably asking, Clarkey, why the hell would you move Bronson Xerri to the wing when he looked fantastic at centre? Look, I absolutely agree, but the issue is you don't sign Jesse Ramian back from the Knights to play reserve grade, and you don't take a New South Wales Blues player in Josh Morris from last year and put him in reserve grade. Further, Raymond and Morris cannot play wing. So I think you move Bronson Xerri there. The reason I put Bronson Xerri there also is Raymond cannot play left and right centre. Josh Morris can play left and right centre. So if he plays left centre inside Bronson Xerri, who will play left wing, he will give him, I suppose, it'll give him a mentor and someone experienced inside him to help him with his transition. Xerri has all the makings of a successful winger, particularly his speed. He could even be the fastest player in the NRL for all we know. So it'll be interesting to see how John Morris uses Josh Morris. My halves are Chad Townsend and Sean Johnson, of course. My front row is Andrew Fafita, Blake Brayley, Jaden's younger brother, and Aaron Woods. My back row is Britton Nakora, Wade Graham, and for the first time in 100 years, someone not named Paul Gallen will be wearing the 13 jersey, and I'm tipping it to be Billy Magoulias. Now, he was fantastic for the Newtown Jets all last year. For those of you that don't know, the Newtown Jets are the Sharks' feeder club, and I think Billy Magoulias has a big future in the NRL. He's a ball-playing lock also, which adds another sort of layer to their attack. Not that they necessarily need it with Wade Graham also being a ball-playing back rower, but I just think that with this many sort of aces up their sleeve, the Sharks should be able to get themselves out of a lot of tight games and situations next year. My bench is Josh Dugan as the utility. Now, why have I got him as utility? Well, I just want to see Josh Dugan come back and not play 80 80 minutes. Why do I want that? Well, his body just seems like he can't handle 80 minutes. He is constantly injured while he was at the Dragons. Throughout his time at the Sharks, he has constantly been injured. I'm not sure if you guys know or not, but if Josh Dugan hadn't missed a game since he made his NRL debut, he would be in the 300 club. Instead, I think he sits at around just short of 200 games. I could be incorrect with that because it's all off the top of my head, but let's just say Josh Dugan misses a lot of footy, and I'd like to see him transition back by the bench where he won't have to play 80 minutes week in, week out. The rest of my bench, and I really like this bench because it adds a lot of experience and impact to the game: Braden Hamlin-Uele, Jack Williams, and Jason Bakuya. Bakuya obviously being the experienced forward to come in, and Hamlin-Uele and Jack Williams bring a lot of energy to the team, and I really like them. Who I have here for my depth, I've got Sione Katoa. Be interesting to see. I think he'll get a go at some stage through 2019. Will Kennedy. I think he could be the next cab off the rank if either Dugan or Moylan were injured. Braden Trindle, interesting. He's definitely the next halfback off the rank for me. He was fantastic for Newtown last year. Connor Tracy, Daniel Vasquez, Josh Carr, Teague Wilton, and Toby Rudolph. Now, you probably don't know those last four names. They're not too well known in the rugby league world at this stage, but they are fantastic players with big futures, and I can tell you that. And it'll be interesting to see how soon John Morris is tempted to debut them. Melbourne Storm here, guys. A couple key changes here to this side. In particular, we'll go over them as we go. My back three is Ryan Pappenhausen, Josh Adokar, and Suliasu Vunivalu. My centres, and this is where this might take some people by surprise: Shandor Earl and Justin Olam. Now, options instead of Shandor Earl include Isaac Loomloom and I believe Marion Seve, Tom Eisenhuth. But I firmly believe that Shandor Earl can take that jersey and he can be fantastic in that centre role. He's more hungry than a lot of other players in the NRL because he's been through so much more. The only other option I really see there is to potentially put Jerome Hughes to centre there, and then you would be relying on Riley Jacks to come back into the team at halfback, which I don't really see happening because the Storm did drop him from that halfback role whilst he was playing, or 5/8 role, whilst he was playing alongside Cooper Cronk, Cameron Smith, and Billy Slater. My halves are Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes. My front row is Jesse Bromwich, Nelson Asofa Solomona, and who's that number 9? C. Smith. Oh, that Cameron guy. He's pretty good. So, yeah, he'll be the number 9, I think. My back row is Felice Kafusi, Kenny Bromwich, and Dale Finucane. Brandon Smith, the hectic cheese, comes off the bench to add hecticness to this team. Christian Welch, Tino Fawasa-Mawali. I just said that name completely wrong. Please don't bash me, Tino. And Tui Kamakamecha. So that's my Melbourne Storm team there. They do have a little bit of depth, as we spoke about before. In particular, around the back line, they've got Seve, Nico Hines, who was a star in Q-Cup last year, Isaac Loomloom, Tom Eisenhuth, and they also have Matty Johns' kid, Cooper Johns, who could be really talented at the NRL level, but we just need to see him bulk up a little bit and add some more muscle to his frame. Although he was fantastic in reserve grade last year. Harry Grant, if you don't know his name yet, you'll definitely know that in a few years. And Max King. If any of those forwards are injured, Max King is straight into that side. It was really, really hard for me to leave him out, actually. And, I went back and forth with him and Tui Kamakamecha for that final spot. In the end, I give it to Tui just. But Max King, straight in the side if there's an injury. West Tigers here, guys. Now, I don't think the Tigers will do very well this year. In fact, when I did my ladder prediction, I actually had them as the wooden spoon. I haven't released that yet because I'll still need to assess it and reevaluate and do a little chopping and changing. But I don't see the West Tigers having a very good year at all this year. My back three is Corey Thompson, David Norfoluma, and Paul Momorovsky. My centers are Tommy Talau and Moses Mbai. My halves are Benji Marshall and Luke Brooks. Front row, Tom McKaylee, Jacob Liddell, and Alex Twal. My back row is Chris Lawrence, Michael Cheekham, and Josh Aloye. On the bench, I have new signing Billy Walters. It was between him and Josh Reynolds, but I went with Billy just. Pardon me, be careful on the Chinese boys before you record. Luke Garner, Oliver Clark, and Elijah Taylor make up the bench for me. Not too much depth here, but they do have Josh Reynolds, Robert Jennings, Russell Packer, and Chris McQueen. So, you see what I mean? Like, that depth there is not fantastic. If they get a couple injuries, particularly around the halves, back row area, they could be in a bit of trouble. So, I don't think they'll do too well next year, but that is my predicted Tigers side. On to the 2020 NRL Premiers, the Gold Coast Titans. That's a joke. AJ Brimson at fullback. My wingers are Philip Sammy and Anthony Don. I've gone with Callum Watkins. I'll give him a second chance in the NRL. And Brian Kelly at centres. I think with a full preseason, Watkins might be able to surprise us all, but I won't hold my breath. My halves are Tyron Roberts and Ash Taylor. My front row is Moeki Fotuaika, Mitch Rain, Jared Wallace. Now, you're probably asking, probably seeing by now, where's Nathan Peets? I have him out of the side, and let me explain that a bit later. My back row is Ryan James, Kevin Proctor, and Jai Arrow. Tyrone Peachy is my bench utility. Shannon Boyd, Jai Whitbread, and Bryce Cartwright come off the bench to round out my Titans team. A bit of depth here. Dale Copley, I think he's the next cab off the rank if there is some sort of injury to the backs. I've got Tanner Boyd here listed. Now, I think if Ash Taylor's not good to go, I think you bring Tanner Boyd straight in. I think he's a fantastic halfback, and really, I think he's our only depth now with Riley Jacks departing the club. Tremaine Spry, he's the second cab off the rank for me. I think Dale Copley will get the nod ahead of him just purely for his experience, but I would really like to see Spry make his debut in 2020. Darius Farmer, another player I'd love to see make his debut next year. Leilani Latu hasn't really featured in the NRL for a while. Looks like he's going through a tough time, but we'll see how he rebounds. Keegan Hipgrave, another big game player, very aggressive young bull. Love what he's about. We'll see how he breaks his way back into this side. Nathan Peets and Sam Stone. Now, on Nathan Peets, guys, I think he's just too comfortable on the Gold Coast at the moment. He's been there for a few years, and his hooker spot has not really been under threat much. He plays through a lot of injuries, but I'd like to see him just get his body right, even if that means coming back into reserve grade and building confidence again. Even if that's only for 5 games, 10 games, I don't care. Mitch Rain did the exact same thing, guys, and I believe Mitch Rain is the better hooker of the two right now. So the blueprint is there for Nathan Peets to literally just copy, and I'd really like to see him do that. On to what I believe is the final team now, guys, the New Zealand Warriors. My back three are Tuivasa-Sheck, Fusatua, and Ken Mamalo. No surprises there. Centres are Patrick Herbert and Peter Hiku. My halves are Chanel Harris-Tavita and Blake Green. My front row is Ignatius Parsi, Wade Egan, and Leeson Armour. Isaiah Papali'i, Tohu Harris, Jazz Tavanga are my back row. Pretty strong team there on paper. Cody Nikorima, I've shifted him back to a bench utility role. That's where he played his best football at the Broncos, and that's where I'd like to see him play for this Warriors side. Adam Blair, Lachlan Burt, and Bunty Afo. I've finished this side now. A little bit of depth here also. Tane Milne, I think he's the next cab off the rank if an injury strikes a centre or potentially a winger. Adam Kieran, Adam Pompey, Gerard Beale, very experienced there, Hayes Perham, Josh Curran, Leovahu Pulu, Nathaniel Roach, Carl Lawton, and Sam Lasone. So there's no doubt that the Warriors certainly have a strong team also there, guys. But that's going to wrap up my predicted 2020 NRL teams, guys. These will be getting uploaded daily on my Instagram and Facebook over the next fortnight. If you follow me on YouTube, but you don't follow my Facebook or Instagram, it's at clarkies.rl.column on both. I upload a lot of NRL news every single day, and every day I work hard to bring you guys stories, not necessarily first, but if I don't have it to you in an appropriate time, I'll ensure that I put a separate spin on it, so you're still getting a unique piece of content directly to your social media feed. So if you want to check that out, guys, please feel free to do so. But thank you so much for watching this video. I've never asked for this before, guys, but if you could, it would be really cool if you could leave a like on the YouTube video. I really want to see how many views I can get on this one before the season starts. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you in future videos. Cheers.